Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. I hope everybody's having a phenomenal week this week. I want to personally congratulate Peter Machicki, the new mayor of the Kenai Peninsula Borough. He won last night very handedly. I think he got something over 3,000 votes of the only 5,000 or so, or 6,000 or so votes that were cast. And there was 4 people in the race. So congratulations now, Mayor Machicki, for being the new mayor of the Kenai Peninsula Borough. And man, do we have a treat for you today. But first, I want to thank all of our listeners, watchers, and readers of Must Read Alaska. We do this because of you. If you want to help keep the lights on here at Must Read Alaska, we are not funded by some dark web money nonprofit conglomerate like most mainstream medias are in Alaska. We are funded by everyday folks just like you that listen, watch, and read Must Read Alaska. And if you already do help keep the lights on, we want to thank you so much. It means a lot to Suzanne and I. And if you want to help, go to mustreadalaska.com. On the right-hand side there's a little donate button. You can click there and donate $5, $10, $100, heck, $1 million if you want. And I also want to tell folks about our new newsletter platform. We're using Substack. It's very exciting. Our numbers are just going crazy with this new Substack newsletter. And you can sign up for that just by going to mustreadalaska.com. And on the top of the webpage there's a little teeny button that says newsletter. Click on that, put in your information, and you'll be signed up in no time. But without further ado, I want to introduce Gwen Adams, who is the Executive Director of Priceless and is a very, very much needed ministry for the state of Alaska. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, Gwen.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm so excited you're on. You were on maybe about a year ago, and we had so many wonderful comments from folks that were just excited about the work that you were doing. So before we kind of kick it off into all the nooks and crannies of all the stuff that you're doing, just first tell us about what is Priceless and why does it exist?
Priceless is an anti-trafficking organization in the state of Alaska. We work with people primarily from the Anchorage area, but we do have clients across the state. And we exist to walk with victims of trafficking into a new life. So we consider ourselves people brokers. The first thing you get when you come into our organization is not a bunch of services or resources, but you get people to walk with you. So you get a team of 2 mentors and a case manager. And so these 3 people become your new community. And sometimes for our clients, this is the first taste of healthy community that they've ever had. And so that little team begins to navigate the 1,000 things that have to happen in order for someone to break away out of a world of trafficking and into something different.
That's awesome. So I know the governor, this is kind of been one of his priorities in the last couple of years. You were on the anti-trafficking working group. Tell us about that group and maybe some of the exciting stuff that's about to come out of it.
Yeah, so a group from the governor's, at the governor's request, we formed a commission, and there were a couple of us on there that were social service providers for trafficking victims, several lawmakers, people from law enforcement, that sort of thing. And we put together over the last several months some proposal or legislative changes that we would like to see. And a press release came out on February 8th saying that that's all been put before the legislative system now, and we are gonna just hope and pray that it all goes through.
Well, that's exciting. I'm sure that you all have put a lot of time and thought and effort into that, and I hope that there's some fruit that comes out of that. So I think sometimes for folks, they don't think this happens in their backyard, in their neighborhood, in the city they live in, or the state that they live in. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like the closest thing they've ever seen to it is like watching the movie Taken. And so tell me a story either a general story or a specific story, just of like what does this look like for the average person that you get to have the blessing of coming into contact with and helping out of traffic? What does that look like for them? What's their story usually like?
Well, the stories are varied, and there's no one socioeconomic race or group of people that are targeted more than another. I think sometimes we get images of what a pimp or a trafficker looks like, also from the movies. But we can show in our system that we can break the mold at every point. For me, I think the thing that you mentioned the movie Taken, that is the first people's fears. Oh my goodness, there's traffickers running around kidnapping people. And although that happens, and I don't want to minimize that, that is not primarily how it happens here in Alaska. It basically, survivors of sex trafficking are first lured into the industry, the sex trade, through what we call a fantasy relationship. They believe that the person they're dating really loves them, cares about them, or that they're being seriously recruited into the modeling agency or something like that. So they go in willingly, thinking it's something that it's not. And can you imagine, for a young girl who's grown up her whole life off-road Alaska somewhere, she's excited to graduate from high school, maybe come to Anchorage and go to school. And she gets here, she's completely out of her element. And I mean, this is a story we hear over and over again. And somebody comes up to her and tells her how beautiful she is, and would she come down and have some photos taken because they're recruiting for a modeling agency or a production or something like that. And it's just kind of an offer too good to be true, and it is too good to be true. Or somebody just wants to start dating them, and they start out by purchasing some beautiful gifts. And there's basically 3 stages to trafficking, and that's the recruitment, and then the kind of the breaking in phase, and then the trafficking phase. And so that recruitment is pretty glamorous. I mean, there's a lot of money involved, there's a lot of gifts involved, and they're saying things that for a young girl or a young boy maybe hasn't heard in a long time, like, wow, you are gorgeous, you're really something special. And so they can be lured in that way. And then at some point, the relationship begins to change, and there's a breaking in period, and then a full-blown trafficking case begins.
So is this primarily adults that are being kind of moved into human trafficking or sex trafficking, or is this also are kids also being enticed into this, 13, 14-year-olds?
Yeah, and the trends are going younger, younger, younger. I mean, when I first started, we had underage girls mostly coming into the program, but now there's kind of an influx of younger children down to age maybe 15. The youngest in our program is 13. Younger and younger being recruited in. The vast majority, though, when we finally get a chance to walk with somebody, they were recruited at underage, between the ages of 15 and 17. We don't normally get them until they're an adult several years later or something like that. But that's kind of that prime recruiting age, is probably between 15 and 20.
So what can parents look out for? Because I'm sure sometimes this happens in, suburbia, Anchorage or the Valley or the Kenai Peninsula. What are some kind of extra parameters that parents can be on the lookout for?
Well, traffickers prey on vulnerability. They're looking for vulnerability, and they exploit vulnerability. So some of the big vulnerabilities that we always looked for was previous childhood sexual exploitation, or incest, or time spent in the foster care system, which was the vast majority of our clients for a long time. But I'm going to add a new vulnerability that we've seen an explosion in the last 5 years, and that is unlimited exposure to the internet in a private place. So as a parent, I think that's the one thing, if I could warn every parent, is like the use of the internet in the world of trafficking has exploded. Our laws are nowhere near caught up to what internet trafficking looks like, and very, very difficult to catch perpetrators. So there's a lot to be said about caution around the use of the internet.
I love that. my wife and I have always been a big proponent of less is better when it comes to the phone. And we watch them like a hawk on there. So I encourage parents to do the same because, man, it gets sketchy real fast on the internet if you're a 14-year-old boy that has access to an iPhone. So
Yes.
I like that you added that to your gamut of things to look out for. So,
Well, I'll give you one story that's a trafficking case online that I think is a cautionary tale for parents. But we had a teenage boy. I think he was around the age 14, and he was a gamer. Didn't have a lot of friends. Loved to play in the games, and now there's something on those games called live chat, or the chat rooms, of course. And lo and behold, a young, beautiful 16-year-old girl appears in his chat, and she not only is beautiful, but she's interested in him, and she likes to game. Like, it's a perfect combination. It wasn't a 16-year-old girl; it was a man in his 40s, and this supposed 16-year-old girl began to send photographs of herself naked to this boy. And then after a period of time said, "Hey, I've sent you a number of photos. It's time for you to send me one." Sends a photo or two, maybe a video, and as that progresses, moves off the game chat, obviously, onto, just texting and that sort of thing. And then the man revealed himself to be who he is, and basically said, "If you don't send this amount of money to this location, I'm taking this video, showing it to your parents, showing it to your school." And so he continued to send more and more videos, finding what cash he could to send to this guy, until he finally broke down, told his parents, and they went to the police with it. But that's not an uncommon tale. That's an example of how the internet trafficking works.
yeah, and I just actually read a story a couple days ago on Fox News of a high school quarterback who this happened to. He got,
Mhm.
thought it was a girl, and then it turns out it was this old man, and was trying to bribe, and this old man was trying to bribe and coerce this high school quarterback to either do this or I'm going to do that. And the high school quarterback ended up committing suicide because he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. And it just goes to show that the internet is not always a pretty thing, and I think parents need to be on the lookout even more so than than they think. Times how much you think you should be on the lookout by about 100, I feel like.
And the interesting thing about the internet is it's been difficult over the past 12, 13 years to get into the school districts and do anti-trafficking training. Like, schools have been pretty resistant to that. But we're finding an open door with coming in and doing internet safety training. And so we've got several stops scheduled this year around the state to go in and do internet safety training in schools and communities and things like that. And the thing is, it is not hard, and it doesn't take a lot of time to teach a child as young as 10 years old what to look out for, and how to recognize a predator online, or the point at which you need to go get an adult. Like, this is not rocket science. These are things that we can train our kids to recognize.
So how do you keep your sanity? Because I feel like, um, seeing this kind of stuff over and over again, I would probably just be crying a lot because I'd just be so, it would be tough to take in. How do you keep a level head and day after day keep at it with something
Mhm.
as deep and as gross sometimes as human trafficking can be?
I think for me, when I started, I made a commitment to God, honestly, that I would quit doing this the day that I my heart became calloused, or my heart didn't break anymore. And so I let my heart break over this. And I schedule regular times of our whole team. It's mandatory that they take a full day off. That includes time off from taking phone calls or anything, once a week, and approximately about a month a year. So we have pretty regimented schedules around breaks from this, because obviously crisis and our survivors, they're not scheduled on a 5-day workday. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crisis
They
crops
happen
up.
at 2 in the morning on a Sunday evening or
Yeah.
something.
So we are, as a team, we really hold each other accountable to that space and getting away. And I think everybody on our team has been in counseling for secondhand trauma. I know I have, and will continue to avail myself of counseling services as needed. But yeah, it is tough work. And I think as tough as walking with survivors is, or hearing stories, I think one thing that's been shockingly painful to me is I just assumed that all our community would all be on the same page around this, but that there are people out there that hate what we do and would like to stop us. And of course, we know that every time somebody is pulled out of the sex trade, it's an average of $200,000 that we just pulled out per year, that we just pulled out of somebody's pocket. So there's a number of enemies that I have, and safety concerns that we have to put around myself and my team and our mentors. And I think that's probably more exhausting and more difficult for me than uh, walking with survivors.
So do once somebody learns a little bit about this, like I think some of the first things that people think as I've talked to folks about this is, why isn't, some of the questions I ask myself and people ask themselves is, why isn't every elected official like focusing in on this, instead of taking a month or two to organize? In Juneau over the last 3 years, we've seen like this is something that should be a bipartisan thing that everybody wants to get behind and help solve. Is, why do you think this doesn't really get that much play or talk about, in the legislation or in the news? Even mainstream media in Alaska doesn't. I mean, I've never heard them really covering this kind of stuff. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a perception out there that prostitution is a victimless crime,
Hmm.
that if people want to sell themselves, let them. And we're in an independent state that really wants the government to be hands off on some of those things. What's misunderstood, I think, is that the vast majority of prostitution now has lapsed into a world of trafficking. It's become easier and easier, especially as like maybe gangs start taking over different neighborhoods. For somebody who is a sex worker to do that without a repercussion from a gang. Like this, you're in our territory. If you're going to sell yourself here, you're going to give us a certain amount of money for that. And so I think as the world's become darker in this area, it's become harder and harder for somebody to engage in prostitution without serious repercussions and trafficking. It's just so incredibly lucrative. Gangs across our country, the second most valuable way for them to gain finances is through trafficking. So it's lucrative. I mean, if you can imagine it this way, if I'm trafficking drugs and I get caught, I likely have drugs. I'm going to prison, right? If I'm trafficking young boys or girls and I get caught, I simply train them to lie about what's happening, to say I'm a relative of theirs or something like this, and I can sell drugs one time. Then I have to go and get more supply. But the average child that's sold into the sex trade is there for an average of 7 years, and probably an average of 10 to 20 times a day. So you can imagine the money that's flowing through the hands of these cartels.
Yeah, this is not a glamorous, like what was that movie in the 90s, Pretty Woman kind of scenario.
Yeah.
This is you're laying on a bed for 12 times a day and you don't have any say, and it is a horrible, grotesque industry. And I'm sure that it is very, very tough to be in your position sometimes, just as you said, because of safety and all the things that you see. But what do you think can be done to fix or potentially alleviate this as much as possible? Because people are going to listen to this and they're going to say, well, I don't know what to do. This is how the heck am I going to do it? She's like the modern day Liam Neeson that's out there saving the world and being a superhero. How do I do this? I just live in the woods in Alaska, and I got soccer games and hockey tournaments and this and that. How can I help? So what are things that people can tangibly do to help what you're doing?
I honestly think as we begin to see the problem and understand it, and we take a holistic, whole community approach to it. That's the only thing that's going to turn the tide. We don't have enough time or money to go out of even from a government perspective. There's not enough law enforcement on the planet, and budgets continue to get cut there. And so it takes a whole community approach. Like I was just down in the FBI's office last week, just saying to them, all right, look, budgets get cut. How can you utilize some community volunteers to help you do the work in this area? We've said that to APD too, like what can we do as a community to come alongside you where budgets have been cut and volunteer and get involved? And there are surprisingly a lot of ways to help, right? And so I just think honestly, as the community makes this known, becomes more aware of it, it's kind of like, let's just pester trafficking out of our state. Like, can you imagine as a trafficker coming here and there's no longer one nosy neighbor down the street, but there's 10 who are aware that trafficking is going on, and they're calling the police every time they see a bunch of girls go in and out of a certain house. Yeah. And so I encourage people like, how do I know if something's up or not? And should I call? And I always say, yes, call, because the way these cases are built is you're going to call, and it's not illegal for 5 girls to go in a house all night long, in and out. That's not illegal. But as we continue to call law enforcement and we put something on their radar, they're looking for that one missing piece that will tie a whole case together. So they're filling boxes in on a grid. So I just tell people, it doesn't matter. The law enforcement's not going to be mad at you for reporting something that doesn't end up being trafficking. So just call often. And I think another thing that I'm super passionate about is the whole issue of we end up with a lot of children in our state who end up with a runaway designation. Because if they leave home with somebody that the family knows and they leave on their own, and then no one hears from them again, they end up with that runaway designation. So nobody's looking for them. We don't really have enough resources in law enforcement to chase down runaways. Unless they're underage, they will. But so there's a lot of missing people that we know are being trafficked. And so we just want to make sure we've got a community that trains up parents. How do I look? What do I need to know about the internet to begin to dig up a digital footprint? And so just going after that, putting some light on the fact that we all can be looking.
So do you guys have an annual fundraiser, any events coming up you want to share about?
Well, we do an annual fundraiser. It's in November. Obviously, we are privately supported. We do utilize some grant money, but that's not the vast majority of what we do. And so you can go on our website and click the donate button. Of course, that is super helpful. We do trainings all over the state to raise up. I told you about these 2 mentors and this case manager that first form a community. We are always recruiting mentors into our program to walk with victims of trafficking. And so we train all over the state for that. It's something called Engage Training. And a lot of other nonprofits and organizations utilize our training to raise up people to walk with broken people in other areas as well. So I think just get on the website, see what's there, and there's a place for everybody to be in this fight. I'll just tout the Spurnard community. They do something called Spurnard Second Saturday now, which is basically all the businesses in the Spurnard area, which of course is a hotbed for all things that we talk about in our organization. And so for this community, all the business leaders coming together, we've held a couple different awareness campaigns on Spurnard, but the businesses in this whole community are wrapping their minds around what's going on and coming together. They support us through Spurnard Second Saturday. There's the Big Heart Art Show at Middleway Cafe right now. Proceeds all come to Priceless. So there's a lot of just community fundraisers that go on around the state. Another one out in the valley with the Keller Williams real estate group. So we're always looking for businesses that say, yeah, I'm going to get involved. Count me in.
What is your website? What's the
pricelessalaska.org.
Awesome. pricelessalaska.org. Folks, you need to head over to pricelessalaska.org. Check it out. And if it's something that you have a passion for, don't have any time for, click on the donation button. give $50, give $25 a month. I'm pretty sure every penny will go towards helping alleviate human trafficking in Alaska. Gwen, I don't want to thank you so much for hanging out with us here on the Must Read Alaska show. You're welcome back anytime. We're going to put a link to the website in the podcast episode description so people can't miss it. If you're just catching the tail end of this episode for some reason, I want to encourage you to go back and listen to the whole thing. It's going to tug at your heartstrings, and I think that's a good thing. I think that this is something that folks need to get behind, whether it's through time, money, or resources to help Priceless accomplish their goal, which is probably to alleviate sex and human trafficking. So thanks so much for joining us, Gwen. Until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.